listening to Inclusive AF with Jackye Clayton and Katie Van Horn.
Welcome to the Inclusive AF podcast. I am Jackye Clayton. Katie is not here with us today doing her regular shenanigans, but I'm very happy that I have a special guest with me today, Bobby Malloy. So, hello, Bobby. How are you doing today?
Hey Jackie, I'm doing well, thank you. The big shoes to fill with Katie's absence, but I'll try my best.
That's right. You'll do. We all are just doing our best. Just doing
Playing
our
for second, yeah.
our best. Now, I have had the pleasure of reading your bio and I will gush over that, but how would you describe yourself to our listeners?
Oh yeah, okay, good question. That sounds even more broad than just like my professional background, but
Yeah.
I'm an organizational psychologist, so very obviously ingrained in the HR space. But my brain kind of is more geared toward organizational behavior, organizational development, and my role is as regional director of people science for Culture Amp, which is the employee experience platform. And people science is kind of, I don't think I was called a people scientist before I joined Culture Amp, but I've really taken that as my identity just because I think it's a cool title. And I don't know, it plays well too outside of work and outside of HR. People are always like, oh, wow, people scientist. And I actually think it pretty accurately reflects being a psychologist, studying human behavior.
I love that. I'm an amateur people psychologist. I think I got my degree though from ChatGPT just in the last 5 minutes. I have fully done enough work. And so, but I'm glad to talk to you because literally one of the things that has come up a lot in just in my career is how much people don't know about the world of work and how the psychology of how things come about and the things that they don't expect that they should expect because it's just a pattern is always shocking to me that we and not understanding that there really is a science behind it. I'm curious as to, has there been anything that you are like, come on, guys, we've been talking about this for like 100 years and it's the same problem and you just won't listen, anything like that come across your desk?
Daily, maybe in some form. But that's it. Okay, it's such a poignant observation that you've made because what I find in working in this field, I've been with Culture App now for 7 years. Within like maybe 3 weeks, I think is my camperversary, is what we call it. And I don't, I'll come across different customers, that sign on to partner with us. And it is a new and novel idea for them that this is something that is a scientific field.
Right.
And even maybe new salespeople when they come in, are kind of surprised to find HR tech is kind of booming with science. It's not just Flash and it's not just programming. And so to find that this is actually like you can apply the scientific method to determining these patterns of behavior that make it easier and more valid to put resources in the right direction so that you're actually getting return on your investment is pretty important. And yeah, I find I have this conversation pretty commonly, which is fun for me because I get to say, I'm a scientist and I'm in this field, and then people go, "Wow, wow, you're in business and studying psychology." They usually then ask me, "Oh, is it like Billions? Is it like the TV show where there's a consultant and she's doing therapy for executives?" I'm like, no, actually, I do therapy for organizations, really, not
Right.
individual people.
I can appreciate that. I mean, I do a lot of work with nonprofits and especially when you explain to them like what the risk by choices that they're making, the potential risk, and how are we going to mitigate for those risks. I think it's always shocking. And I think early in my career, and it's a story, if you've listened to the podcast over the years, you've heard it quite a bit. And it was a turning point in my career, and it was the company picnic t-shirt competition. And I thought it would be really great to have like departments make t-shirts and we could vote as an organization on the best t-shirt. And then that would be the t-shirt for like the company picnic right? Sounds easy and basic, and it turned out to be such a nightmare. And it was like people got so competitive. And then the fact that we picked one t-shirt over another t-shirt, and then this person didn't think it was fair, and then they thought it was rigged, and then there was like nepotism, all of this stuff. And then at the end of it, like a mentor, senior person was like, yeah, of course that was going to happen. Like, that's why we never do things like that. And I found that there's so many things that sound great on paper, but they may not work or align with our company mission or like our company values or what we're trying to stress. And the psychology behind things like, just the type of people that we may have added to our organization or the people that we brought on, like, we're just causing it. I talked earlier about my dog. It's like, you're causing a bad situation. It's one of those like, oh, let's just let all the dogs out and they'll just play. It's like, no, they actually won't. They actually won't play. They will fight with each other instantly. I'd love to know if there are things and patterns that you've seen like over and over again that always seem to be a good idea that maybe people should consider as they're looking at their company culture in the season.
Hmm.
And you can say no too. Like, nope.
Well, just to pull out the thread about your t-shirt idea, there is research published around like in groups and out groups, and something as simple as giving one person a blue hat and one person a red hat immediately creates like a line between two factions. And so in some of these experiments, they try to determine like what's the lowest bar that we can set to actually divide people, and it's pretty easy to create competition.
Yes.
So the shirt idea, I think someone with my background, I think the benefit of our profession is like, have you ever seen some of those like game shows where maybe people are going through a maze, but then they have someone who's kind of got the bird's eye view and trying to help direct them to go in a certain kind of direction because they can see everything that's coming ahead? That I feel like is a little bit of the benefit. And so just anyway, in terms of answering your question about some consistent kinds of things, when I'm working with customers, one in particular comes to mind, and that is the idea of signaling by leadership. And
Mm,
there's a really consistent, like sort of theoretical framework for talking about how all of the actions that you take or don't take are signals that you're sending and communicating to other people, whether that's body language, whether that's your written communication, whether that's the types of questions that you present in an engagement survey or don't present and leave out of an engagement survey. Everything you do is signaling something. And that tends to be a little bit of an epiphany for people because maybe they think of like the actions that they take. That seems obvious. And then not taking an action, they're not really thinking about that. But people are always watching leadership. And so a lot of the conversations I have with senior leaders are about the signals that they're kind of giving out. And then, you can turn that signal strength up, which means I'm doing something and I'm very reliable in the way that I do it. And that way people know that if I'm doing it, it is meaningful. So it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf, whereas you don't want to dilute the signal in the opposite direction. You don't want to do things and not back them up or say things you don't mean. And ultimately, then it becomes harder for people to interpret the signals that you're putting out, and that causes people stress, and that also undermines your leadership. So that's one example.
I that is so true. I think about when you say that story, it makes me think about Slack. I
Yeah.
will never forget someone like reaching out to me because I didn't like click one of the icons for somebody's birthday on Slack.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
was like, I refuse to participate. And she was like, what? I was like, I always refuse to participate. And I was like, why? She was like, why? And I was like, because I don't have time to like click and make sure it's somebody's birthday or every single event or doing all these things. And if I start with one person, it'll look like I like that one person, but I forget. Like, I'm neurodivergent. I fully have full ADHD. clicking on the birthday will cause me to go on Amazon and like look up all these different, like I'll get so fully distracted. Like I just know that about myself. And what
Mhm.
was funny is that she recognized it as a distraction, but then I caused it even other distraction. Like they would be like, Sally's birthday, you're not going to click happy birthday, are you? I was like, I'm not clicking happy birthday. But then it escalating where someone noticed, oh, you don't, I noticed you didn't participate in this and this and this and this. And it was like, is that the rule? Are we all supposed to participate on Slack? Because if so, from an HR perspective, from my amateur OD, right, or like developmental side, I'm like, if that's it, then we need to write a full, like for people expectations and being fair, we should let people know that part of their evaluation is what they respond on Slack. Otherwise, leave me alone. you know, um,
Mhm.
I'm sensitive to things that are fair, and if are we being equitable and making sure people can be transparent. But like things as simple as clicking, the button, or did you use the inclusive thumbs up versus not the inclusive thumbs up? Um, and I'm glad that you brought that up. Of course, we started the relationship. We were hoping to meet at HR Tech. I wasn't unable to go, but it's in the world of tech of like the bias that we talk about, and people think really big, but you're like, no, it doesn't have anything to do with you. Like you creating this being there sometimes can create a bias, that wasn't there before if we're not careful, if we're not looking at all of the various parts. And I think, especially now in the world of AI, we're talking about these things without recognizing how we have so many tools in the world of work, and they all have the ability to cause a bias internally if we aren't on top of that. I would love to hear what your thoughts are about that, especially coming off HR Tech a couple months ago or last month.
Yeah, yeah. So, yes, AI can enhance biases. I also think it could reduce them, but you have to be intentional about like what we're going to be doing about that. So, if you're not thinking about it, then you end up developing AI that just reinforces all the biases you already have,
Right.
and that doesn't help anybody. But I actually think, of course, from like a maybe accessibility standpoint, AI can be very helpful to people to either like focus on just the most important pertinent information, to distill large amounts of information down, to be able to scale kind of their own abilities. And ultimately, I think with something like AI, even at HR Tech, what I was trying to observe from booth to booth, from company to company, was looking to see if there was technology that was built with a point of view in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And ours, for example, is grounded in people science, and that's what I talked about at HR Tech. And we commonly let people know that there is some sort of foundational point of view to it. But whether it's people science, whether it's anything else, uh, I think that gives more of an assurance that there's a reliable way that something's functioning, and then assuming that you buy into that particular point of view and that particular science, let's say, then you have more trust that the outputs that it's providing are valid in some kind of way versus just kind of a be all end all of everything that, could possibly be fed into something.
I can appreciate that. I think it's so important just making sure that people do have that awareness. And I always thought it was funny when people were talking about the bias in AI. It was like it could, but you're obviously not afraid of people, where we have 100% chance that bias is going to play a part, but we're still going to have to work with people. So I think that, trying to balance out what is like normal and natural versus what if we have to have systems or programs in place, that can help. I should say, for the record, I'm a previous Culture Amp user. I'm a consultant now, so
Oh,
that's the only reason why I don't have Culture Amp in front of me. And one of the things that I really appreciated was the training capacity, like within Culture Amp. Like you know when it would show various things, and then you could give people training so that they can have their own learning and understand what was going on with the organization. So you could be it's data driven. This is what we're coming up with. These are the things that might be, you need to pay attention to. And I'm curious, you know, what is your favorite component of Culture Amp? Like I used it so long, and I don't think I've ever asked anyone who's like worked with the company. I know there's a part, something that you like think is really cool. So I'd love to know what that is.
Ooh, I've never been asked this before. That's a very good question. Well, as a people scientist, so my role, as I mentioned at the beginning, is director of people science for North America, but specifically, this is customer-facing people science. So we have PS, as we call ourselves. We have PS in our research lab internally, and they take all of the data that we get and from working with our customers, and they bring it together and put out really cool research. And then we have camper people scientists, and campers are culture ampers. They're what we call our employees. And that's us, but for us. And then my group works directly with our customers, and we help them to design tools in the platform to collect data, collect new information. And then we offer results calls with our customers that interpret the information with them. When I say with them, because we come with like a third party research based perspective, but you are the expert of what it's like to work in your organization. So by talking together, it brings out a much more fruitful conversation. And so in those conversations is commonly where I'm in the platform and going through our results reports. They're very robust. They offer slices and dices of all the data that you'd need. And if I can like invoke AI, we have AI as coach, which is this sort of personal, that's a personal people science coach where we're talking with AI and you're able to ask questions about your results. And so what I like about that is now it opens the capability for people who don't necessarily have a really strong background in IO psychology like I do, industrial organizational psychology, and it allows them to have the same kinds of uh, sort of expertise support as I offer senior leaders when I'm talking with them through the results report. And it helps just kind of distill a lot of different numbers and a lot of information that you're seeing down into the most usable bytes. And that I think is one of my favorite things because it kind of democratizes the data. It makes it available to use by more people than just the people who meet with us.
Right, right. I mean, I feel like I'm excited that you said that, and your understanding with your customers, how they're doing it and building it, of having the expert with it. I can't say enough about how this is a science, like it is an area of expertise, and it's not, there's so, I think there's so much misunderstood about human resources, the part that you're responsible for as a leader versus the actual department, because we all work together. And I find myself when I'm talking with my clients, usually something has happened when they want to bring me in, and they've started implementing all of these various things. And so I selfishly want to ask a question, because I found this um uh a personal situation that I thought was really interesting. Called into an organization to talk to them about um a, a, like something that happened with one of the employees, and they called somebody in to teach a theory to the whole organization. And then I saw it as what I do, and I was like, this is so dangerous. Like the CEO was like, this is what we're implementing, this is what it's called. It's one of the things that I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's one of those standard, oh, we're all going to do these, this is our profile, this is what our culture is going to be.
Hmm.
And it had things like um that we always hear about that was like potentially dangerous, like talking candidly was one of the principles, but yet they also had a problem where women felt like they were being silenced a lot of the time and didn't want to speak up. So then it's like, hmm,
Hmm.
okay, how do we do that? Like, that's really dangerous. So we already know this group isn't feeling safe. And then you want to implement this, which is going to make people feel less safe. I was like, I know you think that this is going to make people feel better, but it's not going to make people feel better. It's
Hmm.
actually going to go worse, get worse. And I don't have my PhD, and I can't tell them like I just know. But some of the things like I just know. So
Right.
I'm curious, like, what do you suggest for those like HR practitioners or people that are within talent when you see things going potentially in a bad direction? How do you bring that conversation back to data to get more alignment with the culture in the organization that they want to have versus what's starting to build?
A couple of things. One, in that scenario, I think it's important this is one of the manifestations of like the importance of company values, which I find is not always easy to identify, especially if, you're a job candidate and you see, company values on websites, and um, many companies might pay lip service by having a value set, but they don't enact them or practice them day to day within the organization. But they really serve as kind of guardrails around the way in which people should consistently act together. And so when
Mm,
you have something that is, a situation where senior leaders might be trying to enact candor, but you also have groups who are feeling unpsychologically safe or psychologically unsafe. It, Going back to the foundation of the organization's values helps to make sure that those two things that the candor can serve psychological safety and not undermine it or weaponize it.
mm.
And anyway, so I just wanted to give a plug for a way that organizational values might come about and be helpful in this case. And then to your question about data, I think that the idea of identifying that people don't feel psychologically safe should come from data, and the recommendation for more candor or being able to talk freely should also be made based on data. So
Right.
it should be the foundation upon which that kind of recommendation is even brought to everyone in the first place. And then with the value set, then it should guide more positive outcomes. And so, yeah, if at that point, the CEO is saying, "Hey, I want to do this thing," but you have groups feeling this way, and you're afraid that those two things might clash, HR can support by becoming data informed, and that holds a little extra weight, and I think helps you act in the right ways.
Right. I can appreciate that. What made you decide to do this, get into this work in the first place? Like, I don't remember hearing about this in high school. Like, how did you decide this is really what I want to do?
Would it surprise you to know that I was actually going to live my life as a Spanish teacher?
Yes.
Okay.
But
Well, that's true. Um, I am the proud owner of a 900-day Duolingo Spanish streak. So I recently got into, well, recently, I guess it's now like almost 3 years, just to keep back up with it. But I had always gone to high school and even college for Spanish. And then I decided, you know what, I'm going to go medical. And I ended up starting a semester of college with a bio course and a couple other courses when I think I wasn't supposed to at that time because I wasn't declared as any kind of health or science major because of the Spanish. And so I wasn't supposed to be in that class, and there was another slot that I needed to fill in my schedule, and I filled it with some other international relations class. And I showed up for that class, and they said on the first day, I think a professor was trying to weed people out, and they said, your grade this semester will be based off of one 30-page paper midterm and one 60-page paper final. And I was like, nope, not for me. This isn't even my major. Why would I
right.
do this? So I dropped it, but I needed to fill something in it quickly because the semester had started. And the only other course that hadn't yet happened on the day that I dropped it was psychology. And so I show up and I'm like, this is awesome. This is it. This is like I'm curious about it, I'm engaged with it, like this feels great. And then you come to realize psychology is the broadest major that I think exists, and maybe business as well. But um, anyway, my professor was a industrial organizational psychology specialized professor, and so added that extra flavor to the course. Where I think you're right, like you don't really hear about it coming up into college, and it just so happened that my school had a track, and they had this professor who um, incorporated it in the general psych class that made me interested to keep going. And that's why I was like, you know what, this is really cool. This is practical application of psychology. It used to be called applied psychology before they
Right.
branded it to the mouthful that it is now.
No, but that's cool. I was like wondering when I was like looking at your background, I was like, wow, that's really cool. And looking into this space, and I was looking and also thinking about like this season right now. It's so important that people like you exist, that you're looking at the people science. I've noticed, we're seeing like a, a, a lack of psychological safety. People are getting really nervous. They're really anxious. And people don't know where to go. There's just so much um concern about like where people are working, where they're spending the most of the day, and what can we talk about, what can we not talk about, all of these various things. How is this year, specifically 2025, have you noticed anything changing with company culture versus maybe prior years?
Yes, to say the least.
Okay, good, it's not just
Let's see.
me. Okay.
No, it's not just
Okay.
you. Where do we start? Um, I think regardless of we could talk about anything, but it is all an example of change. And
Hmm.
uh, there are 100 examples over the past 8, 9 months of the year that have offered change either economically, societally, business-wise. And what I see is there is a lot of uncertainty. And change brings uncertainty. Some people like change more than others as well. And this is maybe more of like a recommendation coming from my professional background, but I always go back to thinking about stress. And what's helpful for me to know about stress is that the way that people, and I'm overgeneralizing, but the common kinds of, ways of thinking about how people become stressed, they first think, is something a threat to me? And if the answer is yes, they then think, but can I cope with it? And
Mm.
so, as you're thinking with any type of change, and you're a leader and you're thinking about your employees, maybe you're introducing a layoff, maybe you're doing budget freezes, but think about whether or not people will assess this as a threat to themselves. If they say no, they're probably not that stressed about it. So that's good. If they say yes, you also need to take the extra step of, if you're trying to reduce their stress, help them to understand how they can cope with that situation. Do they have control over it? Can you make anything more certain so that they have information that helps them feel more control over it? And so as we're thinking about like what's going on in company cultures this year, I find that a lot of people have unknowns. You have a lot of economic uncertainty that is making business uncertain, and like business viability, business health. Do I have job security? Do I have, enough money? Is inflation gonna give me less buying power? There's all of these things on people's minds. So I think it's helpful to think of it in that way as we're consulting with these organizations to try to bring the temperature down a little bit so that people feel less stressed and they feel more in control, of their own destiny.
I think that I like that you saying that of feeling, can you deal with those things? I mean, I love the little thing that says, oh, you've handled every bad day that you've had so far.
Mhm.
You see that. And then my brain will go, and yet this is something I've never dealt with before, and I have no idea if I can get through it. And so trying to focus on the things you can control. I think some people need a friendly reminder of the things you can control. And I'm always of the opinion that it's important to teach employees like how to read, like just the standard like finance well-being, like the same thing that you would give to your stockholders or your investors, like understanding what that sheet looks like for yourself to make those decisions. And the other side of it is so many people now, and it is uncertain, but we have so many people looking for opportunities, that want to make sure that they're making the right next move in their careers or something that's going to carry them forward, or looking at organizations. Is there anything you suggest to people that are looking for jobs so that they can look for a little bit, organizations that don't just align with what their skills are, but that kind of align with their personal values? Is there anything you
Oh,
should look for to know what kind of culture they should be looking for that might be best for their stage in life?
oh, let's get to the stage in life thing too. I know that you brought that up at the top of the conversation, and
Yes.
I could talk about generations all day. And I'm very curious to hear your take. Is there anything that I would recommend for people looking for jobs to best align with their values and not necessarily just their skills? Well, number one, let's go back to signaling theory. It can all
Mm,
come back to signaling. And so look for signals from organizations that are potential uh, employers to determine whether their values match yours. That could be, of course, websites. That is commonly word of mouth. It always helps if you can understand, from people who are currently working there. You know what's interesting? And now that HR tech is becoming more more in the forefront of people's minds about HR than I think it ever has, especially like we've really boomed over the past 10 years. People now have taken employee surveys and they've given feedback, and this is becoming a it's becoming common, and I encourage it to be an expectation. And so
mm,
when you are interviewing, I think it would be interesting to ask, what are your company's engagement scores? How have you as a company taken action on employee feedback? And that should offer signals as to how the company is investing in employee experience, over the course and values and sort of um, over the course of time. So that's something. And just on the skills-based stuff, I think that we don't know how AI is going to impact people's jobs and their skills. And so I do think if you're on the job market, it is worth considering what will the future of this role or this kind of work or the need for these skills be? And does my future employer offer a means of training for how I see the future to be. So, can the employer afford you opportunities to develop in ways that you think are going to be like the next kind of wave of the need for your skills and for your role, without necessarily having to retrain or anything. But that I think is a new value proposition that employers could offer that maybe they haven't had to before.
well, and it's the impact of technology. Like I started when I used to recruit, we used to look for candidates where that the jobs were the logical next stage in their career. Like that's who we were recruiting. So for example, you would look for somebody, like if you were hiring for a director, you would look for somebody who maybe was a lead or a supervisor and they had like 5 years of experience. And so it would make sense for them to be a director. Now, because of AI and the way that large language models are working, I always say the tools that we built is part of the reason that we see so much burnout in the workplace, is because we're looking for people that are already doing the work, that have done it for 2 years, that'll do it at my organization for two
Mhm.
years, rather than look, and AI can't see those things. And it's different on the industry, but we don't see a lot of oh, I'm a large ATS with a module just for retail or for hospitality to sync up who would be good for our organization. Like there's some organizations that it would make sense that someone would have 5 years of experience, maybe education, or if they have tenureship at various hospitals, or but then there's other organizations like that, like sales, like software sales, 3 years, and you're worried that the company's afraid of firing them, or you're not going to be able to afford them. It's like, but seeing somebody change every 2 years is what you expect, and that's so that's a different piece. But I digress. That's like something that I think about within HR tech, and we're just starting to see the impact of moving from more hands-on people to outsourcing to so many software programs of managing that, because there's so many pieces that can't be managed with AI yet, or we don't have the algorithm, just so to get people to that next stage. And so I find it interesting now when it's like, okay, so we have AI or we have software that can do all of this, and now I need you to do this part. And it can't be brand new. Like, oh, I wasn't used to doing all of the relationships, like, or doing the outreach on a personal basis, or outsourcing it, and then the trust. But you're right, like what you said before. I think all of this is a lesson in change management and understanding the changes as we move forward. But I think it's moved so fast. The technology has moved so fast, and the people aren't ready for it. And it's so important that people get ahead of it before somebody else goes to some other conference and finds out and comes back and says, hey, we're getting rid of all accounting and we're implementing this new software. And because some people are very transparent when you're talking with software sales, and they're like, I'm going to use your software and we're going to fire the 10% of our workforce, and we're looking for this to replace people. But it is important. I like what you said about how to manage like that culture and how to work with people to make sure that they feel better about that. What else do you think is important? I see you're about to say something that you want to add.
Yeah, I was going to pull at that thread, that last thing that you had mentioned about, why this technology would be implemented in the first place. And this is what I talked about at HR Tech, which is, so the way that I had started was by first, I think it's important to understand the motivations of other parties to then understand how you can achieve your goals. And so what I started by showing was some research that showed that the top five priorities for CEOs in 2024 and 2025 were growth and profitability. And profitability had increased from 2024 to 2025. And so AI, I think the big promise of it looks attractive because by being able to increase efficiency and productivity, by doing more with less, theoretically, we can increase our profits. And that's important because in an age of uncertainty, economic, social, whatever, profitability gives more control to the organization to do what it wants to do and kind of lets it achieve its own destiny rather than need funding, need seed money, need any external sources. And therefore, okay, AI has this promise. Would it deliver? HR, our own research is now showing, as we have 7,000 customers all over the world, and so we surveyed several hundred HR practitioners of all levels in an organization. So I see HR folks and senior leaders, and across them, interestingly, only about 35% of HR folks said that they said no one owns a AI strategy in their organization. And I am trying to make the pitch that this like is such an opportunity for HR to be the ones to step into this kind of vacuum, this leadership vacuum around AI, because I'll also add that some of our survey research of these HR folks found that many feel, or maybe the vast majority feel like the company's bottom line is what's going to benefit and not the people. And HR, is that you're the people. So I'm trying to motivate HR to be the ones that, grab the mantle of AI strategy in the organization so that they can, help the organization achieve its own destiny. But then also you can shape what AI is for the people, for, the employees, for HR. You don't want HR to be absorbed by other functions because we feel like AI can just replace what HR does. And ultimately, what is HR, human resources without the human in the workforce? So if it's all robots, then it'll be robot resources.
Right. That's not going to be a good. I don't like
No,
I don't like robot resources.
no.
Um, well, at the end of our show, we like to ask, like, what's one thing that you want our listeners to remember for our conversation? I know it was just kind of like Q&A, kind of going back and forth,
Hmm.
but what would you like our listeners to remember based on our conversation today?
I hope it's that then. I hope it's the idea that if there are HR folks listening or folks who are not in HR but who are inspired by the idea that there is an opportunity to take the reins of what this sort of technological advancement can look like within your company. I think the time is ripe. There's clearly a there's not one general consensus of whose responsibility it is, but given that HR, this is kind of my point of view, is that HR is the one that is best positioned to do this. We oversee the users of AI. We oversee the ethics and the compliance of its deployment. And in order to make sure that it works for everyone, I think HR brings a lot of expertise to the table to be able to use it well. So, yeah, that would be I hope if you take anything away, in addition to the fact that I, was an aspiring Spanish teacher, if you can also feel motivated to like figure out how to start getting engaged. And I think, by the way, the first way to do that is get familiar with it yourself, start taking opportunities to use it. And thankfully, for now, there are many different LLMs that you can use that are free and, start figuring out, how can this help me? How can this up level, my abilities and my the kinds of questions that I'm asking of our work and how to demonstrate impact or realize value.
I love that. And I think if I had to choose one thing, I would just say, like, you you don't have to guess. Like, there is a science behind this. I feel like so many times people panic and then they make quick decisions that can, like, affect organizations and such. Like, you may be a leader with where you are, but there is a science behind it, and make sure that you're tapping into the right resources and making those decisions. And uh read all of Bobby's stuff. You have there's so many papers. And I was like, oh, when I was researching, I was like, oh, look at this. I was looking at all of these different things. Like,
Uh,
go to the experts, look to the helpers before you make any of these decisions, because there are humans involved. Before you just give major decisions over to AI, make sure you are working with people that understand the humans in your organization and how the technology is going to affect them, and that you have a good change management structure in your organization to make sure that you can that you're adding to people's safety and not detracting from that as much as possible. Well, I would love to know, where can people find you?
at Culture Amp. Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, LinkedIn.com/in/B Malloy, Bobby Malloy, as is my name. And yeah, at Culture Amp, please, if you're interested to reach out on LinkedIn, that's great. I'd be happy to say hello. But otherwise, I do a lot of webinars and public facing things at Culture Amp too. So you might see me around if you're in the HR space.
All right. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Bobby, for coming on the Inclusive AF podcast. I am Jackye Clayton, and thank you so much.
This was so fun. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.